It's on now. Should I go ahead? Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Please come on in. If you're in the hall, feel free to come on in. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a minute. Before we get started, my name is Kit Redmer, and I'm the Community Outreach Liaison for the City of Westminster. And on behalf of city staff, just wanted to thank all of you very much for coming. It's wonderful you braved the weather to join us tonight, so thank you so much. And I just have a couple very quick public service announcements before I turn the mic over to Mayor McNally and our leadership. First off, I just wanted to remind everyone that the questions in the town hall are answered via question cards. So if you have a question, please, 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 if you haven't already, go out to the hall and we have question cards, and please go ahead and fill out a question card. And we have a basket you can put it in, and I'll bring those up to the mayor and the team so they can answer it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, very quickly, I just wanted to thank everyone for reading our participation decorum expectations letter. And I know everybody here seems like a really calm, cool and collected bunch of people. So I know there's no concerns at all, but I just wanted to thank everybody again for conducting themselves tonight in a civil and polite manner, because that's how we can all get something out of tonight and enjoy it. So thank you in advance for that as well. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Mayor McNally.
We have some folks here from DPS, where am I? Westminster Public Schools, Kevin McCoy. Ryan McCoy. I've had a migraine all day, so who knows what's going to come out of my mouth tonight. We have was Mr. Duffy here? Okay, and I know we have Mr. Chancho. Did you want to say hi? And we have Christine. Did you want to say hi? She's on the school board.
Yes, hello and welcome everyone. My name's Christine Martinez. I'm a school board member for WPS. We're so excited to host this event today at our beautiful school. This is one of our newer buildings. This is a preschool through 8th grade. And we were able to build this a lot in part due to taxpayer funds from mill levies and bonds. This school opened 2 years ago, and some amazing things are happening here. We were able to send a group of middle schoolers to New York to compete in a drone soccer competition, a national drone soccer competition, mostly against high schoolers, where they came in 4th place. So we are so proud of our students. Yes. Governor Polis was here on Monday to celebrate their success. And we love our partnership with the City of Westminster. We have lots of programs and internships that we want to continue to go, and we're really looking forward to an engaging conversation. Thank you all for coming.
And until I saw your Facebook post, I didn't even know it was such an event.
I know, it was news to me too. It's so amazing.
That was great to see him. Kevin, I'm sorry. Do we have my basket of questions? We have, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm Mayor McNally.
Okay, and I'm Bruce Baker, one of the council members.
I'm Mayor Pro Tem DeMott.
I'm Obi Azadi.
And we have Councilor Seymour, who is with family tonight. We have Councilor Emmons, who is with family tonight. And we have Councilor Nirmela, who's not feeling well, so. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. I will just go in here and find our first question. I think illuminating tall structures at night during bird migration is irresponsible. You should find another way of honoring graduating students. Any thoughts?
No.
Well,
I think the structure they mean is City Hall. So City Hall, for the last handful of years, we've lit it up for the different schools with their colors for graduation. And so we go on a schedule. If you look at the city's social media and probably on our website, we say which schools we're honoring. So that's the first. I've actually heard a complaint about that. Honestly, we get a lot of appreciation as we honor the graduating classes. So certainly we will take that feedback back with us, but we do want to make sure that we're honoring our graduates and those folks who worked really hard to get diplomas as they graduate this year. That I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on what time they turn off or if they're on all night or not, but we could look into that.
Our next question, I
And
would
just
like.
to, I'm
Oh,
sorry. Just to add on to that, the pandemic was very hard for most kids, as we all know, if you're a parent here, if you're a grandparent here. And to graduate in the midst of that, I think deserves some recognition for our children. So we hear the complaint, we'll look into it. But to what Mayor Pro Tem said, it's a balancing act because we do need to recognize how hard it was to get through that.
I would like to know what the city plans on doing about the amount of traffic and speed on Independence between 88th and Wadsworth. This is a road that goes directly through a neighborhood and people are using it as a through street.
So I
Councilor
actually
Zadi?
live right there. I live right off of Independence and 88th. I do hear the noise. It is increasing from a traffic standpoint. And we have actually submitted that. So residents have asked me that question, and I've submitted it to city manager to look into it. We would have to conduct a noise study as a first step to figure out if this is a real issue or not. But yeah, so the 2024 budget process begins late summer. And that would be the best time to initiate a full study, to your question, of when and how. So that is in the process. City Manager Mark Freitag is actually here tonight. I don't know where he is. Raise your hand.
Back in the corner.
But that's something that we've received several requests from, and I would personally like to see that through and see what the results are. However, just to balance that with the practicality of it, it's usually $20, $30 million to install a wall. HOAs have done this for less, and all of that really does require that noise study to be done first to see if it's a problem that raises to the bar of the threshold of doing something about it. So that's step one.
That's particularly for just a structure like a brick wall or something like that. That doesn't necessarily include doing something like speed bumps, more mitigation as far as city reaching out to Google and stopping actual traffic being directed onto Independence. There is pedestrians, there is parks, there are tons of, and I hear slammed brakes all the time. There needs to be something than just noise mitigation. There's safety control, there's problems of pulling into our neighborhoods without feeling like we're gonna get rear-ended. There are more problems than just the noise. So that's fine if we need to start with that, but we're wanting more than that.
So to add on to what Councilor Azadi is saying, because I know he's asked specifically around your concerns, being that he lives in that area, I think he's had a lot of his neighbors reach out to him. And I know that one is in the queue for the city to look at because we've gotten some feedback. I don't remember exactly what that is right now. I think one of the other things for tonight, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kit, I believe that staff will be taking all these questions and we'll be publishing the answers to these, because if we don't have exact answers for you tonight, which we're not gonna have specific ones for things like that, but it is in the queue, and I know that Councilor Zadi's been definitely adding his want to have that looked at, and as well as many concerned residents as you. So I anticipate that we'll be able to get some more information posted after the meeting about that specific area with Independence and the speeding and the traffic concerns.
When we went around and brought flyers to all the people up and down Independence, I mean, everybody was just up in arms about it, but there were a couple of people that have lived in those homes since they were built, and they said that they've brought these things up to the city many times, and it keeps getting passed around from someone one time sent it to the police force sent it back. So nothing's getting done. I mean, we're having cement trucks, 3 at a time, come down here. It's not a through street. When we move there, it's lowering our tax. I mean, we really are lowering the value of our homes is another thing because of it, because of the noise. You can't sit outside. And it's dirty with all the trucks and semis and so, okay. Just want to know how soon.
We're on it.
So we've lived on Independence for 35 years, and they did try to build roundabouts. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it only lasted maybe 2 months because the emergency vehicles said they couldn't get by. So they built it. It was beautiful. It solved part of the problem, but then they had to take it out. So they built 2 of them, like one right by my house and one up on the hill. So I don't know how much that cost. I don't know how much it cost to pull it out, but they did try something, which was good, but now it's as bad as ever.
Yes, can you please explain, I think 2 years ago there was a analysis done on the traffic that went through, and at that time they realized that people were speeding, and again, that was 2 years ago when COVID was going on. So 2 years ago there was a study done, and yet 2 years have passed and the city council hasn't done anything. Reading everything on Nextdoor, you can clearly see that people are up in arms about this. So I want to understand the process that the city looks for in order to change something.
So it's a great question, and I recall I was on the council when that went through. A couple things that I would point out to you is city council, we go to the city manager and say, hey, this is a problem that we're hearing from our constituents, and then the professionals look at that. It does take a long time to do those studies. COVID added a lot of unknown pressure on a lot of different areas in the city. So, you know, I think that we're getting to the place where things are starting to get back on track. I would add that we changed city leadership over the last 2 years. And so what I've been seeing, you know, from being in one of these seats for the last 5 years is the rate at which the city manager and his team are going after this stuff is increasing. Now that we're kind of on the other end of COVID, we have a city manager who's been in his seat for a while. So I appreciate what you're saying. I don't have the specifics off that study with me tonight, but I certainly think that that's a good thing for us to remember as we ask the city manager to go take another look at that so that we can figure out the correct path forward.
So could you explain something, and let's back up a little bit. So city council approves things, correct?
Correct.
But is the city manager that initiates that?
Not necessarily sometimes, but like for this instance, this has been initiated by citizens' concerns, and that was brought to city council members, then brought it to the city manager and said, we want this looked at. And so this has been looked at, to your point, a couple years ago, which we've been through a city manager, an interim city manager, and now have a permanent city manager. But you're right that we approve it, but it has to go through the professionals that say, okay, here's what the studies say, they might give us a couple of options of solutions for that, and then they'll say, this is what it's gonna cost. So if that's in the current budget cycle sometimes, or if it's not in the current budget cycle, sometimes we can find dollars for that in the year. Typically, that's gonna be pushed into the next year because of the way the city budget works. So, you know, now is a good time for us to look at it because we haven't done the budget for next year yet. But we certainly, to Councilor Zotti's point, we're on this and we'll make sure that we follow up with the city manager about what our options might be.
So where did it come up about the walls? Because everything I saw up until the city manager put out a general email on Nextdoor, it was basically, can you put up speed bumps? Can you reduce the speed? And then all of a sudden we see, hey, it's gonna cost $20,000 to put up walls.
I
Where
think
did that come
that
from?
was and don't hold me to this, but from my recollection, a citizen brought that up as a potential solution. We hear, you know, citizens, you might not see every single one, but maybe we get 20 emails apiece about a particular item that has different questions like, why don't you do walls? Why don't you do speed bumps? And we try to answer each one of those questions as far as solutions that residents might propose.
So would an alternative be, instead of putting up walls and looking at the cost of, the cost of that, looking at and putting in speed bumps?
But potentially, but again, I don't want to sit up here and tell you what those solutions are. We need to go back to the professional staff and say, hey, we need to come up with some solutions to propose to City Council. And then it takes 4 of us to get behind saying we want that. But I think that this is something that, you know, City Council wants some answers on as far as what solutions are. And obviously, there's public here that, you know, want answers, and we appreciate the fact that so many of you showed up to address this specific topic.
All right, thank you.
And one of the challenges is the prioritization of where within the city to do speed bumps, to do extra lights, to do these things. So that's why, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, the budget process this year would be a good time to prioritize this. If, for example, if our traffic department needs more of a budget in order to do more of these things around the city, like in this area, then that's where we should prioritize that. So
where did the budget come in when you changed the name of the park to the former city manager?
I'm sorry, what?
So there was a former city thank you. There was a former city manager, and I saw recently in one of the city council meetings that you actually changed the name of a park to his name. So was that in the budget?
No.
It obviously came out of the budget. I mean, you're talking about much different dollar numbers, but I would have to get back to you to find out where they pulled that money from. That I would guess that probably came from the parks budget.
So there's different priorities for
There's-
different things.
With different priorities, different buckets of money, different things allocated through the year where maybe they have room for signage versus not. Maybe they had earmarks that said, hey, we're going to do X amount of signs for parks, and one name versus a different name doesn't cost us any different on a sign. But there is a cost associated with renaming a park when it comes to signage. So, you know, but I would have to get back to you on specifics where those dollars came from.
We're not just interested about the sound, the noise. We live on Independence between 90th and 93rd. Our fence has been smashed into once. Our neighbors has been smashed into 3 times. Down the hill, there's a whole fence line that's down. I mean, something has to be done soon just for the safety of the pedestrians walking up and down the street, as well as for homes, you know, in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Our next question. Downtown Westminster has many vacant stores, and residents of Eaton Street and Ascent Apartments complain of shoddy construction and broken amenities. What are city leaders trying to do? Why are city leaders trying so hard to convince residents downtown Westminster is a success?
Well, as you know, there is some really diversity on council, and I'm of the camp that thinks downtown Westminster is a failure. And failure is a word that's very difficult in our language to say aloud, so that's why you have the PR campaign about the new downtown and stuff like that. And until we take ownership in a real sense, nothing's going to change. I couldn't help but think that about Independence Avenue. It's only been that way for what, 40 years? So, got to take ownership and then say, is this right or is this not right? And then you need ideas and then do them.
I would add a different context to that. Certainly, my perspective traditionally has been, you know, I don't like when government buys property. That's just me, and that's on the record that I think that. However, the city at some point made the decision to buy that property and has been selling it off parcel by parcel. So when you look at some of that vacant retail shop, that now belongs to somebody who has to fill that. That's not necessarily up to the city to do. We're not the ones who are going to hold those leases. I have heard from some of those developers that they actually are starting to fill out. I would remind folks that COVID put the brakes on a lot of things. Development in the downtown has actually went at a track that's more successful than they thought it might be. But this is a 15 to 20 year project. So I share Councilor Baker's concerns about us doing our part with it. However, you know, success is measured in different ways for people. I will tell you that we just finished our first set of for sale townhomes there. They were sold out before they were done. the next ones are already starting to be built out. But we need to make sure that we have, as we go through that as well, we need to make sure we have the right mix of for rent property versus for sale property versus retail, versus commercial. Another big component that is in the future that I know the city staff is working to try to attract is some business parks. So it's yet to come, but the thing that's nice about it is this is different people who own those properties, whereas before the mall was one owner, that owned that property. So as this turns, if you have one owner who stops taking care of it or is not being successful, they could always sell that property, and you could just do a block versus a whole 105-acre property.
Next question.
I'd like to add. And this is where the different vision comes in. The new downtown was a 10 or 15-year project 10 years ago when it started. We've made, besides the mistake of getting into it, we've made other just horrendous mistakes along the way. We have had the same real estate agent on that property for 10 years. To me, the results of that real estate agent do not warrant us keeping her, and yet last year we kept her. We've just lost enormous projects on that piece of property. There was a group going to build office buildings, Schnitzer. They had tied up the land for what, 2.5, 3 years? And then they run away and do it. We haven't built 1 square foot of office space there, new office space there. And there's supposed to be 2 to 3 million square feet of office space there? No, there's a long list I can go down, but the council's reluctant to take ownership and look at what we failed at there.
I would like to respond to that because I disagree with at least part of that pretense. At the end of last year, Councilor Baker brought up the idea of opening it up so that we didn't just have one agent. I agree with that idea of opening it up. However, that wasn't the time to do it right before we were going into New Year when we had things like a water plant and a lot of other priorities that council was trying to tackle. Staff was given direction this year to look at opening that up so that we didn't just have the one agent selling properties. That is something I anticipate as we go into this year's renewal of that contract, that we don't go that route because that is what the majority of council asked. So the other thing that I would add is the office space, although disappointing that that fell through, that's not necessarily anything that council controlled. And I hate to make COVID the excuse, but COVID changed a lot of things for people, and it killed a lot of development that was going to happen otherwise because the economics no longer worked for the folks that had originally signed deals.
Thanks. I actually have a follow-up question specifically about that, which is how much is city council and city leadership involved in the industry mix in downtown? And in any shifting decisions that might be made about that industry and residential mix with zoning, because as you were talking about that contract falling through, I'm thinking about the enormous amount of commercial vacancy because COVID has really shifted the landscape, and office space probably isn't as viable as it once was. So I'm not sure I want to see 3 million feet of office space in there that's going to sit vacant. So I'm curious how much you all, how much room you have to negotiate that with zoning or any other interventions as city leadership.
So that's a really good question. And so anything with zoning with, within the city, whether it's in the downtown or any other part of the city, it's zoned a specific thing in our comprehensive plan, and then the downtown has a specific plan. And so we actually just I think last Monday, you could look and see what each block is zoned in the specific plan for the downtown, but that doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't change. So say a business park came and said, hey, I really want this block. There is flexibility for us to look at that and say, does that make sense? The downtown team certainly has been the ones who have been prescriptive about what is where, and they've used the professionals on our professional staff to decide each of those. I wouldn't necessarily say each one of us, we're all going to have a different opinion about where retail is versus for rent versus for sale. But there is flexibility in that in order for us to be able to pivot. And one thing I wanted to hit on again, and I hate making COVID an excuse, but reality is the conversation that happened is just exactly what you brought up. That's been with this group of 7 people and the people that were here prior to the last election. What is going to happen in that space? And I think we're still seeing office space pivot, because now people were like, oh, we're going to do this hybrid thing. And I think you're seeing a lot of companies decide whether or not they really want to allow hybrid, how much they want to allow hybrid, and that's really dictating how much space they might need. And so I think at the end of COVID, people were thinking that more of the commercial office space was going to go away, and we're seeing that trend start to go back, where we don't think it's going to decrease as much as it looked like at the end of COVID.
And just to add on there, as you can tell, the diversification of voices on council, right? That's actually a good thing for all of you, because all of your voices are being heard in the perspectives that you're hearing up here, right? And that's the same way, so when I think about downtown, how we went about that development by us owning it and not selling it to one developer, that actually saved us through COVID, because if anything happened, then the whole thing, then the whole project would have been dead. But the way we're doing it is patient, right? We're diversifying who we give each parcel out to, which helps us be more resilient through the economic turmoil and everything. So yes, it's taking a while. It's going to take longer. COVID slowed things down a lot, but I think at the end of the day, we have to be a little more visionary, right? What really does downtown bring us? It brings us housing, it brings us entertainment, recreation, a magnet for economic activity, right? It's going to bring millions of dollars to our city in perpetuity. And I think our residents all deserve a choice, right? Our seniors deserve the choice to downsize if they want to, which they can't today because there's not enough housing supply. But without townhouses, with the condos, maybe they'll be able to afford to sell their homes and downsize to a smaller home. Our youth deserves the choice to rent, right, towards home ownership. That's an option that we should be giving to them. It's going to take time for them to actually build up the economic wealth, right, to actually own their own home. So it provides choice to everyone, and I think that's the long-term vision here, and we just ask for your patience. We will see this thing through to the end. Thank you.
Next question is, who is Robinson, Waters, and Odoricio in relation to Westminster? They are one of the sponsors of the Westminster Marriott Gala. I have no clue who they are. I just know that any business can be a sponsor at any other event that anybody puts on, so I don't know who they are.
As far as I know, they're a law firm, and I think the other important thing to note is the gala isn't the city's event, that's the chamber's event. The chamber is an individual entity that's not run by the city.
Could City Council discuss bringing back large item collection, or better yet, spring and fall curbside pickup? Both Arvada and Broomfield have it. Broomfield does curb pickup. Thanks. I know that this too is a budget item. It's been brought up any year that I've been on council, even when we had to cancel it because of budgetary reasons. Right now, this year, we tried to have it, but there was not anybody that would bid on it. So it continually has to go in through the budget process, but if you have no one that will bid on doing it, it's hard to provide it.
And I think that was the big kick in the pants, was that nobody took the bid when we put out to do it, because we as a council wanted to do it. But some of the other things that I would just add that we've asked staff is to kind of look at how you do that. I know staff has put out different organizations that you can reach out to that do large item, but we kind of had some ideas too about what we've seen in our neighboring communities, and really tried to look at the problem from a different lens of folks who have large items that need to get rid of them, whether it's transportation for truck, whether maybe our volunteer groups could help. So I hope in years in the future that we continue that conversation that we started this year when we tried to put it back out to bid.
The city has money from the canceled extension of Chase Street over Niver Canal, connecting to the Walmart parking lot. Could that be used to install more streetlights along south side of 95th Street or Place between Chase and Depew? I know that, I believe it was Walmart in their MOU or whatever, yeah, in the ODP, whatever, that they were supposed to do it. But with Highland, is it Highland Village over there? That they didn't want that street cut through. But I asked staff, because I didn't know this answer today, because we don't deal with those kinds of things. I just said, can somebody give us a heads up if this question is asked tonight? And we can ask that the lights be put on 95th. Why is the city wasting money on things like a clock tower in front of Westview Rec, but isn't spending money on real issues that affect the quality of life for people that live along Independence, like traffic and noise? Go ahead.
So, I actually really like that question, because I live right over by Westview, and my kid is like, what in the H are they doing over there? And so reality is that's actually a cell phone tower, and it's being paid for by I think by Verizon. I did ask today if there were other carriers who would be able to use that. We were told up to 2 other carriers were going to be able to use that tower. And the reason it looks like the clock tower is because we worked with them to make it look prettier than just a cell phone tower. So that I understand, obviously we want to look at independence, but again, different buckets of money. And you know, I have to applaud staff for working with the people who wanted to put a tower up in order to make them pay for, you know, the tower and make it look nice so that it didn't just look like a cell phone tower in front of our rec center.
Next question, who could we contact to put together a citywide volunteer cleanup event along Little Dry Creek Trail pathway? And could the city help sponsor such an event with trash bags, garbage pickers, gloves, and masks? That's an easy one. Just call 303-658-2400, ask for Martha Hines. She will sign up whatever group wants to do this, and they will provide the items that you want.
And we did it on Earth Day.
But they can do it every week if they want. This is another independence one that we've already asked.
But there's a couple of those.
And I just remind you that all of these, whether we get to everything or not, every one of these will be on the website with an answer. So, the open space along Sheridan between 98th and 97th Avenues has a large prairie dog population that is destroying landscaping for homeowners along Ames and 97th Avenue. Could the city relocate prairie dogs to Rocky Flats and introduce ferrets?
I don't have an answer about the ferrets and moving them to Rocky Flats, but certainly prairie dogs is something that the city is familiar with having to deal with. On that specific one, though, I'll make sure that staff posts an answer about that because it you know, just depends on the place and, you know, what the actual problem is. They have to go out and look, like, how many prairie dogs are there? Are they really causing damage? There's a lot of what ifs that they have to go through. I will tell you, this is one of those topics, though, that you get people very adamantly passionate on both sides of the topic about getting rid of them versus leaving them alone.
I understand. That was my question, and it wasn't an original thought. Somebody at the city had spoken to one of the people that lives adjacent to that prairie dog town and said that there was the possibility of this actually occurring, that they were looking at areas where prairie dogs had become, you know, more pests and there wasn't enough of the ecosystem to support them.
Good. I appreciate that
Yeah.
Background. I know that City Manager Freitag and his team will look at it closer.
Can we go back one
Oh,
to the Dry Creek?
pardon?
Can we go back? I don't think this is working.
You're on.
Oh, it is. You went through the Dry Creek question really quick about, you know, cleanup and to volunteer on that. I don't know if there's another question in there that's going to address the homelessness, but I actually have the business that's directly in front of Dry Creek. And I wanted to see what we could do because that place is just being overrun. And I have my office every day report with pictures the mayhem and the fires and all the BS that goes on there. And we reported immediately, and it went from being the police during COVID and they couldn't move anybody. And that's a really big yarn that's got a lot of drama to it that was near tragic. And they finally pulled it all out, and then it started up again. And every time I'm like, no, 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 no. Please, somebody come over and do something about this now. Like, sorry, that's what the park rangers now put in a thing with the internet, and then we'll go over there and we'll see it. And then the whole thing just goes and goes and goes. And it is out of hand. And I want to know, as my taxes go from $12,000 in 2020 to $38,000 in 21 to $50,000 in 22, with a notice that my building is being reassessed, that I can't even get like this homeless camp that just keeps going with like all the unspeakable stuff to like take care of that. What do we need to do? I will have like, I have 25 employees, and I go out there and clean that stuff up. I'm putting up a nice fence, the whole deal. I will super help out, but there's got to be something that happens. We just spent, I don't know how many, $20 million on that park right there at like 68th and Lowell, just on the other side, for everything in between Bradburn and Lowell to just be like mayhem. It's people right through there. It's awful.
Okay, because this is both being recorded and we're asking the questions, I will see if I can find the homeless question, and we'll get to that so that we can answer that one. What is being done about the constant drag racing in several areas of the city? Would you consider starting a task force with police and residents to pinpoint a map where and when, then set up undercover cars with speed traps?
Well, we've already talked about this, and we've already discussed this, and hasn't the police department done this?
They've been working on it.
Yeah, so there's a statewide and countywide task force looking into speed racing. It's a priority for our police department. It's a priority for this council. We've talked about it often at City Council, what to do about speeding. We're still investigating all the ways. It's a statewide issue. It's not just here in Westminster. It's a problem, but it's definitely a priority for us.
And so the other thing I would add to it, they are doing tracking. I don't remember where you reported offhand. I know you could report it.
Reportstreetracing.com. I did it.
So it's there. To Councilor Zotti's point, it's a regional approach, because reality is you chase them. I don't know if you remember the kids who cruised the mall, and yes, I was one of those. They used to chase us back and forth between Arvada and Westminster. Same kind of problem with this. And so they have to look at what our neighbors are doing. But if you look at our agenda for Monday, there is actually a ordinance that we're looking at in order to combat street racing, because this council said, on top of what is going on, what could we do with, our governing power in order to make more penalty? So there is a bill before us that talks about potentially impounding cars if, a certain amount of street racing that's egregious is happening with that vehicle. Because one of the other problems that we hear a lot about, and this is, again, regionally, is those folks know how fast those cars are, and they know at what point they're not gonna get pursued because it's not safe. And so then how do you then hold them accountable once you find the car and you don't know who's driving? So there's some complexities around it that we're trying to figure out. And we, again, are looking at what our neighbors are doing and trying to figure out what the right solution for Westminster is. So definitely on our radar.
Why does downtown Westminster area not have more restaurants and breweries like Arvada's downtown area? I envisioned the area would be more like Arvada's, a gathering spot where people want to come to. So far, we don't have that. I know that we were just given 5 companies that are going in. One was something with wine, and I don't remember them all. But stay tuned. You should be seeing there's more coming in, I would say, the next 2 weeks. What efforts are being put forth towards trash, debris, feces cleanup created, left behind from all the transit encampments in town, especially along Big Dry Creek pathway and surrounding public areas and parks?
This stems from something that happened last year when we dealt with the homeless problem. And at that time, we were spending about $400,000 a year for all the efforts we would do for the homeless folks. And so this council decided to try an approach that we called continuum of compassion. And we increased the budget to $2 million. And I think it's failed. And I'd like to take this opportunity to ask this council, we need to readdress this. And I basically advocate a much more common sense and expecting people to follow the law. It's illegal to camp in our open spaces. We have social services at a county level. We have things going on at a metropolitan level, okay? But every member of this society, in my opinion, needs to follow the law. And we have several, there was a camp at Regis, and they wouldn't let anybody but Denver transient in there, right? That's my understanding. And they were like 2/3 full. And there were all these other people who couldn't go there. And they don't want to go there. I don't think there's anything broken or wrong about homeless people. And I think we should try a sterner approach that counts on individuals to be responsible for their conduct.
Could I, So, although I agree with Councilor Baker that people should be held accountable, I see this issue as more complex than that. There are federal rulings in court that have hamstrung the city in some things they can and cannot do. The other thing that I would say is, no, it is not broken to be homeless, but often broken people are homeless because they have mental health problems, they have drug abuse problems, and I think the biggest challenge, in my opinion, in Colorado is we've mixed so much of the homeless conversation where we talk about affordable housing versus folks that are living in open space. Those are two different kinds of homeless, and what they classify as homeless in Colorado is very wide. And although I would like to figure out how we address each different component of it, the folks that are often in the parks often are shelter resistant, whether that's because they have unchecked mental health issues, unchecked substance abuse issues, and often both. And trying to figure that out is not an overnight solution. Early on, we talked about priorities of budget. I think it shows that council, this is a priority for them that we put dollars behind it. Councilor Baker, I believe, opposed putting those dollars behind it. I do not think that we have been far enough down that road to say it's a failure. Am I daily frustrated by how slow it is to be able to help folks like the gentleman in the back in his business? I certainly am, just like the rest of you, but it's more complex than just going and sometimes moving them. Sometimes we get to that place, but there is a whole process legally that our staff have to go through with our police department before they can move them. The other thing that we have really worked on trying to educate people in private business, because if they're in the open space, there are certain rules because it's public space. If it's a business property, we want to make sure that property owners know that if you call as the property owner, we can eject people a lot faster than open space because of it being public property. So it's a complex issue. I certainly don't want to give every answer to the different steps they have to go through here because I'll get them wrong. But certainly they are going to follow up with these questions after the meeting.
I appreciate you defending the council and all of your efforts, but coming into the neighborhood as a new resident, paying almost $500,000 for my house, and I feel unsafe even just riding my bike down the pathways, and these people are there all night. Are they allowed to stay overnight in these public parks? And what about all the trash and all of the needles and all of the just harassment that goes along with this? Like, I get you can't hold them to a littering charge, but my gosh, I mean, there's like sleeping bags and tarps and things just littered along this creek. And it looks like you guys spent quite a pretty penny on redeveloping these parks. And why don't you keep, what can we do to keep them nicer and to keep them up? And I mean, there's feces all over. It's gross and it's unhealthy and it's a health concern and a crime concern as well.
I don't disagree with anything that you've said. There's the one component that I can't control is what people are gonna do. When people decide that they're gonna break the law or camp places they're not supposed to, our staff have to react to that. we certainly aren't alone in this problem. I mean, Colorado's not alone in this problem, and I'm not saying we don't have to figure it out. I mean, I feel your frustration, ma'am, but the reality is that we have a certain amount of staff, and we're trying to figure out how we can solve the problem. And we haven't found that magic bullet yet, but I certainly am opening to hearing what you think that we haven't done and seeing if that's potentially something that might help with the problem. You know, but we're working on it, and I don't want to say something that's not true. I don't want to promise things I can't, promise to you, aside from we are trying.
I have a question on that real quick, I'm sorry. So you increased it 150%, so you went from 400,000 to how much?
2 million.
2 million?
Now, like $1 million of that was going to build a shelter, but there was.
So that's what I'm asking. Where was the accountability of that money?
I'm sorry, say again?
The accountability of that money that you increased it, and nothing was done. So you increased it 150%, but yet the problem still exists.
Can I remind that we are in May of this year? That money was increased for the budget year 2023, and we're in May. I don't know exactly what impact that money has made yet. We haven't had time to have it reported back. I will tell you that I've seen more action from what we had before, but I'm not in the weeds with our folks every day. But certainly, I think it's a point where let's get some feedback back about where things are and how that money is serving us, because we are halfway through the budget year, so it makes sense to look at it. But
and just to add real quick, there are legal reasons, as Mayor Pro Tem said, but if you just take a step back, right, and you say, how do we solve this problem? It's not a problem. It's real human beings who don't have homes, right, who don't have security. And these are not outside. The big myth is that these are folks from Denver coming into Westminster. These are actually, a lot of these folks are Westminster residents. They are our residents. And when we look at it, raise your hand if you garden. Okay, so say you have a garden, right? You have lots of plants, and each plant is unique and different. We all represent different types of plant, and plants have different needs, right? If one plant is dying in your garden, do you just pluck it out and leave that and just leave it bare and not try to figure out what the root cause is of why that plant died? Is it getting enough nutrients in the soil, enough sunlight, enough water? The way to solve this issue is to actually solve the root causes. Lots of our residents, we have 10%, I think 9.2% of our residents are at or near the poverty line. A lot of our residents are becoming homeless every day, right? So if we don't solve the hole in the bathtub, right, then the water will keep leaking through. The way to solve this problem is to actually start addressing the root causes. And one of those root causes is one of many, right? So there's mental health, as Mayor Pro Tem said, that's a huge issue. But then housing, right? Then food security, then there's all sorts of intersectional reasons why this problem exists. And it won't be solved if we just pluck them out the garden and pray that they don't come back. Because that's not how it works. And it's statewide, it's nationwide. It's a nationwide problem driven by these intersectional issues.
Yeah, but you guys are watering that problem. That's the thing. But with using these grand analogies and these really nice soft things versus holding people accountable for actually what they're doing. I'm telling you, I look right over it, and those individuals, and I have talked with them, they fight, they shit in a can, they throw everything in the creek. These are not people that just lost their home that need a little help, that go to the church and are like, hey, I need some food security, can you help me out? Because I think that everybody in this room, as a civil person, would be like, yeah, what can we do? And let's just make sure that it's actually going to rent, it's actually going to your insurance, it's going to these things. These are not these people. So trying to mix this whole thing and talk about this garden and stuff, you pull the weeds out of the garden. The whole San Francisco deal with Schellenberg and everything that's happened in all of the other cities. This is where we live. If you guys Californicate this place, then you will have the same thing that's going on in LA, It's going on in Chicago. It's going on in Portland. It's going on in Seattle. All these places are like falling apart because people are using metaphors about like, we can't do anything about this, when people are actually acting in a way that needs to be addressed head on and say no. And I have called in day after day after day after day after day, and nobody has like shown up and been like, here's a ticket, wipe your hiney with it. I mean, it's a joke. So like, you guys need to address what really is a deal, and that is to say, we're not gonna go with this big like swell of what the nation is doing. We're gonna protect our home and our citizens, and we're gonna see to it that people that like are unwilling to be housed, or however, you know, the euphemism is now put, like, is like wiped away so that it can actually be addressed. Because I'm telling you, it's just
disagree
going
with
off.
anything you're saying, but due process takes time. So
Ma'am, let him answer.
I understand, but those people that you referenced deserve due process, just like you deserve due process.
To deny our safety.
I'm not.
You can't do anything about people throwing needles on the street. A dog eating a tinfoil full of meth. That's not fair. You're asking respectable people who are paying their taxes, who is trying to run a business and make his own life, and he can't because you guys can't do anything about it. You're neglecting our own safety for the safety of people who don't give a shit about us.
Yeah, and somebody's gonna get hurt in the meantime.
They already have. They already have.
Did-
Behind my shop, people have already gotten hurt. In fact, the cops literally saved a lady that was bringing them lasagna back in like 2021. She like brought lasagna to like them, and they were so whacked out of their mind that they like attacked her, and she ran, and we were able to call the cops, and they met and like actually grabbed the dude and saved the lady. I mean, literally in the nick of time. She was trying to like nurture the garden.
I understand. I could give you total the same examples. My son works at a fast food restaurant. They had a homeless person come in and OD in their lobby. I see it all the time. So I don't want you to mistake. Can I speak? I let you speak. I understand, and I see the same things, and I have the same challenges, and I have a family that lives here in the city too. I didn't step into this role because I don't care about this community. However, staff has told us specific things that they have to get past in order to comply with the law. We cannot have our officers go out and break the law. That's not the solution to law breaking. I don't disagree. I didn't say that. I said that they have to go through due process, and this council has put resources behind having that done. So if we need to, you know, I'm open to hearing from the city manager if he thinks that we need to be more heavy-handed with it, because at the end of the day, I don't disagree. If people are breaking the law, let's hold them accountable. But you have to understand that there are hurdles that our law enforcement have to get by in order to hold people accountable. The world's not a fair place, I hate to tell you, but we're working on it.
Next question is, what is the current status concerning the Jefferson County Airport prop planes tortuously, relentlessly flying over countryside neighborhood? Today, May 1st, 2023, all the way back to June of 2020, my beat noise canceling headphones are not enough. Mayor Pro Tem, I know you sit on that board.
So, challenging subject, because it is an airport that is not managed by the city. We sit on a round table where we give feedback basically to the round table and to the airport. The FAA has a certain method in which they want complaints in order to address it, and part of that is being part of that round table. Our last meeting, we had a consultant in who talked about flight paths and how they could potentially change some of the flight paths. So each one of the municipalities and counties who are part of that roundtable are going to be working with their staff to make recommendations about where those flight paths should go. And so, like, for example, could they fly over the open space more often and not over the homes? So there are some ideas that are being floated. I think that the issue is difficult because we don't really control what an airport does. You know, there's a lot of things that they're allowed to do or that are dictated by the FAA, not, you know, the city of Westminster certainly isn't. But we are at the table trying to discuss it. I will tell you, last year we left the round table because we were frustrated with the lack of movement on it. What we were told was if we're not at the table, that are basically, that's FAA's, that is their mechanism in order to take those complaints. And if we're not at the table as one of the impacted municipalities, we actually hurt the other municipalities. I know that Councilor Baker came last time and said that he feels that the airport should be closed. I don't know that that's a solution that is based in any kind of reality that's actually going to happen. But I certainly understand the frustration around the fact that the airport has gotten busier.
The Lowry was closed, Stapleton was closed, Columbine was closed. It isn't the fault of the airport, it's just what happened around it. The people who own the airport, and the only ones who have power, because the Community Noise Roundtable has no power whatsoever and no legal standing whatsoever, the only people who have power are the Jefferson County Commissioners. And they declined to put out a plan for the airport and what they think the future of the airport should be. They won't do that. But if you look at the advertising that goes on, there's now commercially scheduled flights flying out of Jefferson County Airport, and those runways can hold planes as large as 737s and A320s. So unless the Jefferson County Commissioners want to meaningfully involve all the people who live around the airport in what that future of the airport should be, in my opinion, the only thing to do for all the communities around is to lobby our senators and representatives and say, don't give any FAA money to the airport until they want to do it. And closing the airport, I think, would be fine.
In light of the large number of multi-housing and other construction projects approved, show us water use studies related to this growth. How many new households will be there at the end of the year 1, 2, and could we also see traffic studies?
I'm not sure what specific development it's referring to. What I can tell you has been done recently as the comprehensive land use plan was approved. That land use plan was originally submitted in 2021. It was held over because there was a 3-3 vote on it because we didn't have 7 council members. And so it was held over to this year. This current council said that they wanted to relook at the comprehensive land use plan, and they wanted to match it to water because the majority of council believes you can't build beyond what water you have. We don't feel that would be responsible. So the comprehensive land use plan now matches water. And so back to what we were talking about with the downtown, there's a lot of pivot that could happen, but at least we know if we make this change in this free parcel or redevelopment in this parcel and it impacts water, 1,000 acre feet more than what it was there before, then we know we have that much less water in other developments that we can allot to other development. With the traffic studies, they typically will look at the traffic study when they go through like ODP when they're coming to us with a new development. That's a pretty standard thing that the staff and developers will do to see how the traffic impact is going to be if we allow a development.
I'd say when I came on to the council, the 2024 plan had just been not voted for. It was a split vote. It came back to the new council in March of last year, and it didn't change. It still was 1,000 acre feet over what we own, which didn't seem right. And so then we got it again in October of last year, and we still didn't approve it. But during this whole time, Mr. Baker, Mr. DeMott, Councilor Seymour, and all of us on council we needed to know how much water we had, how much building could be done. So the water team put a backdoor database together with all of the things that they have to have for water. And then on the front side, we sat and they showed us if this lot that's vacant, somebody comes and they want to do X, Y, or Z to it. They sort of know if it's commercial how much, and how much space it is, how much it's going to take for water, if it's going to be multifamily, if it's going to be single use. They have that average. So we can put the number in there, and it would say immediately what acre feet it's going to take. We got a little crazy with it to see if it would show us if we went over our water, and it did pretty quickly if we put in some really crazy things. So that has been done, and that is there for, we have, I think, 85 properties left in this city that can be built on. That doesn't include infrastructure that has already been built and maybe is going to be redone. Some developer says this isn't working, they want to redo their development. That's fine, they still have to come through the process. But that was a big thing that's happened in the last 18 months, as well as looking at the water rates and getting those.
And if I can add one more thing to that, well, the mayor did an excellent job in leading for this new, really comprehensive plan, but it only stay as long as there's a majority on council to keep that plan in place. And realistically, there's already thousands of approved apartments that are in the pipeline. So expect, I forget the number, but it's something like 7,000 more apartments coming to Westminster.
And to add on to that, one of the things that council has done that used to be a practice, if there were things that were already approved, like in an ODP, they could administratively build some of these multifamily. We saw that in the promenade. So we recently made some adjustments to our process so that council sees more of those developments, so that the community's fingerprints are on them, instead of, this was administratively, or it was approved by a former council, and then they could administratively approve under a certain acreage of multifamily. So we've made some adjustments about that too, so that council at least is aware and can give feedback if it's necessary.
What are the steps needed to get a committee together to come up with a solution to propose to the city about opening Stanley Lake for safe recreational boating? You've been part of that.
It's a challenging topic because we have an IGA with our partners who also have water in Stanley Lake. Stanley Lake is our sole source water supply for the city of Westminster, but we share that with 2 other municipalities. So we have an agreement with those municipalities that was put in place by, no member on the current council voted for that, but it's in place, and I can't remember how many decades it's in place.
10 years.
10 years?
10 years from when I saw it.
But we have continued conversations with our neighbors. The reason that it got put in place by former administration was the concern around the zebra mussels getting into the water. At the time, there was a task force of the boating community who looked at solutions to allow boating to keep happening. We had solutions before that people had figured out a way to get into the lake without going through our safeguards. And so, the decision was made, and there was an agreement with those other municipalities that basically says we won't allow motorized boats. And so that's in place today, but we would have to basically get those neighbors to come back to the table in order to change that because of that agreement. But I know that this council has at least made efforts to try to talk to our partners.
Make the median in front of Kings on 100th. It's ugly. Other parts of the city have nice, pretty middle lanes. We have weeds. I don't know, I'm trying to think of 100th. I can't think of a, if it's Wadsworth, it's CDOT. If it's 100th, it's us, but I don't know of any on 100th.
We don't, the median's not on 100th. Well, at least there's not one on 100th. There's one on Wadsworth, but the mayor's right, that is under CDOT. And I know over my time, there's been times where CDOT hasn't mowed those weeds and you can't see it, into the median. And I know that I've asked staff before to have CDOT at least clean it up, and they have. But if it's getting out of hand again, certainly we can reach out to our partners in CDOT and ask them if they can go through and clean it up. All of Wadsworth is CDOT.
So beyond that, though, Independence is another pain point where it looks terrible. It looks awful all the time. You can tell the difference between where Arvada starts and where Westminster starts on 88, because you can see it's all clean and well kept, and then you get to Westminster and there's weeds everywhere, there's dead trees everywhere, leaves are never picked up. It's
As a volunteer for Recycle Colorado, I have been impressed to learn about the benefits of composting. It says composing, but I think it meant composting. What is available in Westminster for citizens to participate in composting? If nothing, are there plans to initiate a composting program? There are. We are looking for a recycle center that is central. We have not found that yet, but everything will be in one spot because the recycle centers that we have at Westview, at the Station 1, are horrific. People just throw, no matter if it's full or not. It's just, talk about eyesores, they're eyesores. So we're looking for that, and composting will be part of that. What is the city's policy regarding homeless encampments? This is a growing problem. I understand that we need to address this compassionately. However, there are safety concerns by many in the Highland Village along the canal. I have walked that canal on Census Day and met some of those folks. I have heard that there will be a new justice building. Is this the result of a competitive request for proposals, or is this just another handout to a single consultant contractor who has come before City Council and expects a mega buck contract?
Well, this was another point of contention on the council. We did a study back in 2016. We had the architecture firm of Anderson Hallis Architects. They did it in 2016 when this council brought up looking at a court building again. We used the same architects and they updated their report. And at the December meeting, they said we could fix the old building for between $24 and $29 million, or build a new building for between $30 and $33 million. So we said, well, let's look at building a new building. And when they came back to us just recently at the end of April, that had escalated to $42.7 million. So we're still moving ahead with it. There was a majority of council that wanted to move ahead with it. According to our protocol rules, if you feel passionate about something, you should try to inform the other members of council. And I found a courthouse up in Moffett County, northwestern Colorado, that used the shell of an old Kmart and finished 80,000 square feet, 40,000 for the court, 40,000 for the city offices, and did it for $24 million. So I'm trying to encourage my colleagues to look at alternatives, because we're also supposed to be inventive and imaginative on council, to do a better job of building a new courthouse.
Voters put you in office to rein in costs. Why are we spending all this money on a treatment plant when we have one already that would cost let to retrofit? You know what it means.
So, just sorry.
No, go ahead.
But just,
I was looking over there.
Just to combine the previous question with this one as well, infrastructure, health, etc. There are lots of fields with expertise and experts in them. The great thing about council is we get to synthesize all the inputs from all the experts, right? But we are not experts ourselves. It's very easy to sit here and say, we should do this cheaper. Why this way? But if a whole group of experts are telling us, well, economics have changed, inflation is crazy, it's not the same to build now than it was 2 years ago. It's not the, so my point here is we have to take a step back and make sure that we make the right decisions and we don't just make decisions off our hip. It's not a game. These are real lives. A water treatment plant takes real experts who are experts in development, experts in water and health, to then give our staff, who are also experts in their field, and they give us a recommendation based off of their expertise. It would be like if I said to you, hey, when's your next doctor's appointment? I'll handle it for you, right? I'll look up online and I'll just do a few hours of study and I'll just do it for you. Would you say yes to that? You shouldn't. So oftentimes you'll hear from council, oh no, I don't agree because I think this was a false data point or something, but they're not experts. We are not the experts. We need to learn how to make better decisions for the long term of our city, which takes listening to the experts and then synthesizing and making the right decision. So the reason why we're spending money on a water treatment plant and the way we're doing it is because we spent 12 months reassessing a study that was already done, years, and that took 12, 24 months. So it's been years worth of data and collection and analysis, from experts from all over the place that told us, and based off the economics, and we all know where we are with the state of our economy, right? It's not in a good place. Supply is low, interest rates are high, etc. Things are very expensive, and because we've done so much study, it's way more expensive to build now, but we have to do it now because it's not going to get any better. So we've chosen this path because of all of that, and that's why we're doing that.
I think that's all very good points. The other thing I would add is, on the water plant specifically, we saved $100 million by hitting the brakes on that. That's $100 million that we don't have to pull out of our budget. That helped us also. It fits into a financial plan that the staff has come up with, where the current rates that we did decrease, by the way, are sufficient in order to pay for the bonding that we need to do to make that plant happen. Part of what they learned through that pause was the original assumption of how big the plant needed to be was bigger than we really needed it to be. Part of the reason that we're doing the plant is because we have a dated plant in Semper. There are differing opinions about whether or not the risks that staff tell us are real risks or not. So oftentimes you'll hear things stated as the gospel truth, but it's subjective, and we have to measure what the experts, to Councilor Zotti's point about the experts, we have to decide, each one of us, the 7 of us, whether or not that weighs heavy with us enough to go with staff recommendation. There are challenges at the water plant that would still be there if we retrofitted, which was one of the options, that we would still have some of the risks that we won't have with building the new plant. In my mind, I agree with staff's assessment that it makes us more resilient. We have, basically another plant that if one goes down, we have a third plant that can serve water to the people of Westminster. Not only that, it will be able to do some things in modern technology that other plants can't do. And so that is important. I want to also hit on the courthouse real quick. Part of what we go through with all that stuff is most of us, we were all invited to go tour the courthouse and learn about what the risks were at the current courthouse. And so the decision to build a new courthouse, we're going and taking that tour, listening to the presentation and them saying, here's how we could or can't accommodate those concerns with the building. I will also say that the current courthouse is our original municipal center. It is our oldest building that the city of Westminster owns, and it was not purpose-built for a courthouse. And so I think there's a lot to be said for making sure that our service to justice is good and safe. And so I'm excited about the new courthouse. I would say that that's not a done conversation either, though. That $42 million, we haven't even went through the design phase yet, so we're not sure what the actual cost is going to be. They came back with a conservative number that they don't think that they would go over. I certainly, from my take from that meeting was, try to make it less. That's always going to be what council, at least this council, is going to push. Where can we be more thrifty with that and still serve the need that the community has?
We also were looking at what does the judge need when he's sentencing people, and where do people have to go? We don't want to see people having to go over here to get this, over there to get that side of town to do this. So we were talking about things like the mental health, that they may have something that they, in their judgment, that they have to see mental health. So we already have a partnership with Community Reach. So what can we do to continue that, but help have that on campus? And what else do we need? It's the same with the water treatment plant. there are, Thornton built theirs, and within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, had the CDPH closed them because of their PFAS. And so we know all of that stuff's coming. We haven't been rash about saying, oh, it has to be this or that. Those things we're trying to still filter out are people that work with it every day, that are working with other cities and know what their obstacles have been. When we went through this exercise with the water treatment plant, we looked at one different area than the last group had, and I really thought it would work. But all but the one we picked, well, it's like building a home or remodeling. Well, you could do this, but then you can't do that, and there's not enough room here. And we are looking towards, if we're spending this money, build out and the future. And we need to know everything that whatever the city needs is going to be there. So those were my decision-making keys. And do I love it? No. But does it make sense for the future of this city? Yes. So did you have something?
Just wanted to add, in case anyone didn't know, our current plant Semper is still running on 1960s technology. And there's serious cracks everywhere. And it's a serious health risk. So it's easy to get lost in the numbers. Sometimes you have to elevate and look at, well, what's the big picture here? We're trying to save the health of our city for the long term.
And if I can add on, first of all, there's no health risk whatsoever with our water. None. Zero. We don't have any PFAS because we get our water from a little bit from, well, the western slope and all the rest out of really Clear Creek. And there's only, I think, 10 permitted sewer plants above us. So we can't even detect any PFAS in our water. There's no good way to treat PFAS, even if you do detect it. That's Thornton's problem. My problem with the water plant, because I was the no vote, is that we pay $2 to $3 higher than all the cities around us. They have to follow the same rules we do. They don't get their pipes at a discount, or their valves, or their pumps, or anything else at a discount. So why are we $2 to $3 higher? And when we take on $150 million of debt, which is what we talked about last night, at 5% interest, that means we're never going to have water to water our lawns at the reasonable prices our sister companies pay. And my big disappointment with the reassessment, because that's what this newly elected council was big on, the price of water and reassessing the things, we used the same engineers to do the reassessment. Just like we used AHA in 2016 and then again in the recent thing. Well, people aren't going to diss their own work. People are proud of their work. They're not going to find something different. What we should have done is got a different engineers, because even though there's a lot of facts and numbers in engineering, there's also subjective values. Boulder retrofitted their water plant, about the same size as ours, 7 years older than ours, using the same technology as ours, and they did it for $30 million. I don't think we gave it a fair chance to have a different look.
So, like I said, beware those who claim to be experts, okay? Thank God we have a majority to get anything through. It's not one person that gets to decide. It had to be 4 of us, so the diversity of voices here is a good thing in this case, because I don't agree with any of that.
Can you provide an update on 73rd? Our stuff must have died. I don't have a green light anymore. Can you provide an update on 73rd Avenue redevelopment project? I haven't heard any updates. Has anybody else?
I don't know where it's at right now. We would have to have staff answer that question as a follow-up. So I'm assuming you mean 73rd and Lowell. Whoever asked the question, originally there was theater there that used to be a gas station, that the city acquired that property. It was going to be a senior housing that got voted down by prior council, which there were still council members who were part of voting that down, which I'm one of them, because for me, it was the environmental concerns around that property, but I don't know where it is right now, so we'll have to get a follow-up on that.
Put it in the box, and we'll get an answer. And our last question of the night. Thornton has banned panhandling. Let's do this in Westminster, and if not, why not? Seems reasonable to me.
I don't know that Thornton has banned that, because my understanding is there was a federal case that said that's unconstitutional to ban panhandling. I don't think that constitutionally they can do that, is what the court is currently saying. So I'm not really sure what Thornton, what they did or didn't do.
But we have, for anybody standing in our medians, whether it's signs, whether it's the people that have the 50% off going out of business sign, politicians, whoever, it has to be a median that's at least 36. 4 feet wide. 4 feet? I thought it was 3 feet. Anyway, 4 feet wide, or the police officers can stop and tell them they need to move on, especially those that have dogs and things, because it's just dangerous.
Yeah, and I appreciate that staff looked at that. No matter what the individuals are doing, that is a concern that I've heard about for the last handful of years. You know, not necessarily panhandling alone, but politicians or sign waivers or whoever, or people asking for money for somebody who needs a kidney. The concern is that they're going to fall off one of those medians, and you know, somebody's going to end up with something that's going to alter their life and hurt somebody if they fall off those medians. So staff at least was able to look at that and say, can we you know, use ordinance to make sure that people aren't standing in places that aren't safe for them to be standing, because there's not enough space.
Kit, I am going to end the evening the way I should have started it. My headache is kicked in early, and I'm feeling more human at the moment. So let's go around, ask everybody to give us your name and what area you're from. And we can't thank you enough for coming on a rainy night. And does anybody have a Nuggets score for us?
Should be winning. Did you ask for a name?
First, yeah, you can give us your name and what area of town you're from.
Yeah, Steve Martin, and I live in Legacy Ridge.
You want to speak for both of us?
Nancy and Dave Paul, and we're in the ranch.
Susan DeMille, Highland Village.
Just stay on this side, then we'll come to the other side.
My name's Annie Contractor. I live in Westbrook neighborhood.
Sandra Rappenecker, Stanley Lake.
Dennis Rappenecker, east side of Stanley Lake.
Brian, Stanley Lake.
Tiffany, Stanley Lake. Laura Boyd, Arrowwood.
Alan Farb, Highland Greens.
Brian Lawson, Highland Village.
Dave Carpenter, Countryside.
Tim Vettel, Oakhurst.
Scott Graybaugh, Oakhurst.
Chuck and Kathy Busby, Schoenberg Farms.
Sean Armstrong, 68th between Federal and Lowell.
Galen and Bev Fogel from Stanley Lake.
Dan and Fiona Hart, we back up to the Independence Raceway.
Gabrielle Bravo, 72nd and Winona Court.
Zach Taylor, Westminster Art District.
Ryan McCoy, South Westminster, Gregory Hill, wherever you want to call it.
Andy Lab, Green Knolls, Lakers up 53-48.
John Palmer, Shaw Heights.
David Fortune, Harris Park, South Westminster.
Cole Newman, Historic Westminster.
My name's Brenda Gallegos, and I live right by Tennyson Knolls. Sarah Cisneros, Harris Park.
Lou and Kathy Passcode, Northridge.
Gary Shea, Harris Park.
Grover Sardison, Harris Park, otherwise known as Old Westminster and Forgotten Westminster.
Marilee Menard, Ranch.
Anita Brow, Ranch.
Audrey Yano, Sherylwood.
Christine Martinez, Sunset Ridge.
Darlene, The Farms.
Gloria Pinelli, East Bay.
David Bernard, Cotton Creek.
John Jurchek, Vista Ridge and Highland Greens.
Oh, grand finale. Brenda Garcia, and I am the Exploded Neighborhood, for those of you who didn't know.
And I'm also a resident, Historic Westminster, Kit Redmer.
Again, thank you so much for being here, and we have lots of things planned over the summer. I think we start down here in Historic Westminster with a couple of events coming up in 1st of June. Saturday, don't forget, Armed Services Day, 10 o'clock at the park at 104th and I don't know that side street, but at the, you know where it's at, off of 104th at the city park. Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Bravo.